Welcome to the stream. Today is January 28th. All right, we'll be starting shortly. Actually, well, yeah, let's just start right away. All right, let's see here. Sorry, it's a little warm today, so let's see. All right, so today's the 28th, which means we have 3 articles, starting with more Democrats side with far-right and anti-trans attacks continue. As anti-trans attacks continue. Second article will be workers refuse to give up forming the Common Ground Cafe Cooperative. And final article for tonight will be 5 things to know about Louisiana's new far-right governor, Jeff Landry. Cool, let's get into this. What I'll be doing today, just to reiterate, this is a read-along stream where I read, give my opinion, and as the group grows, I will post people's comments and opinions and have guests and talk about the articles. Cool. All right, let's start with January 22nd. These articles, links are provided in the description using articles from liberationnews.org. Feel free to support them in any way you can. All right. First article starting with more Democrats side with far-right as anti-trans attacks continue, written by Morgan Artiukina, January 22nd, 2024. It's about a 5-minute read. The photo is a pride parade in Washington, D.C., credit liberation photo. Here we go. Just 3 weeks into 2024, the Trans Legislation Tracker website is already tracking 308 active bills, including 38 bills at the national level, that attempt to deprive transgender Americans of a few legal protections they have and to introduce a slew of new restrictions targeting their most basic rights, including the right to access necessary and life-saving health care, to have their identities legally recognized, to practice their culture, to engage in sport, and even to access public spaces like bathrooms. In 2023, a stunning 503 anti-LGBTQ bills were introduced across the United States, and 75 were able to become law. In addition, the U.S. Supreme Court delivered what is expected to be only its first blow against the meager national-level legal protections LGBTQ people have when it ruled that discrimination is legal if it can be given a religious veneer. Clearly, the far intention of relenting in its all-out drive to divide the working class by demonizing LGBTQ people and trans people especially. The new bills build upon previous successes, expanding attacks that had previously only targeted trans children, such as denial of access to medical transition care to include adults as well, as trans activists have long warned would happen. Ohio's de facto transition ban. In some cases, Republicans have simply given up on the democratic process. Earlier this month, Ohio Governor Mike DeWine issued an executive order that bans all gender-affirming surgeries for minors and directs Ohio state health agencies to change their regulations for access to transition-related medical care to require approval from a slew of medical and mental health experts first. This amounts to a de facto ban on trans-affirming medical care, such as hormone replacement therapy and gender-affirming surgeries, by severely restricting access, and is a reversal of all trends in trans health care away from pathologizing transness as a mental illness. The Ohio House of Representatives has also voted to override DeWine's veto of the bill in question, HB 68, which would additionally ban all types of transition-related care for Ohioans under the age of 18. In a joint statement, PSL branches across Ohio called DeWine's executive order a cynical move to appease his transphobic base after the veto of HB 68 and called on Ohioans to contact their state senators and demand they refuse to pass the bill. Indeed, as the attack on trans lives is part of a larger attack on fundamental democratic rights across U.S. society, so in Ohio has this fascistic move by DeWine followed numerous attempts to undermine voters' rights in recent years. In early 2022, the Ohio Supreme Court struck down 5 different legislative maps for unconstitutional gerrymandering in favor of Republicans. The new map, approved this past September, is still considered by experts to be heavily biased towards Republicans, and the state Supreme Court only narrowly upheld it in a 4-3 vote. Missouri and Florida escalate attacks. Other states dominated by Republican Party have also expanded their anti-LGBTQ attacks. In Missouri, where all trans-supportive care for minors was banned last year and a ban for adults was only narrowly averted due to statewide protests, 21 anti-LGBTQ bills were pre-filed. 9 were heard on the very first day of the legislative session, widening the attack even further. In Florida, with the most harshly anti-LGBTQ laws of any U.S. state, lawmakers have proposed a slew of hateful new laws, including requiring affidavits stating one sex assignment at birth for every Floridian who wants to get a state ID, and to an illegal recognition of trans people in the state, and even a bill that would make an allegation that the plaintiff has discriminated against another person or group because of their race, sex, sexual orientation, or gender identity constitutional defamation per se. As with recent attacks on the free speech rights of Palestine solidarity activists, an oppressed group would be essentially banned from naming their oppression. Critics of Israel and Zionism have been labeled anti-Semites. Likewise, if it passes, SB 1780 would make one liable for defamation lawsuits for criticizing anti-LGBTQ policies as discriminatory. In West Virginia, Senate Bill 194 would ban all transition care for not just minors but adults under the age of 21. It would also require all social workers, counselors, psychologists, psychiatrists, and therapists in the state to attempt to cure trans people of their transness. The language of curing transgender people, like that of curing gay, lesbian, and bisexual people, is nothing more than an attempt to erase a subsection of humanity that has existed as long as humans have existed. You cannot cure queer people because our queerness is not a sickness. You can only intimidate people into denying and hiding their true selves, a goal that serves the capitalist system by upholding a patriarchal rules that also oppress women. Democrats side with far right against the people. While Democrats have postured as the last line of defense for LGBTQ people against the far right's assault, in the New Hampshire House of Representatives, several Democrats sided with GOP lawmakers to pass 2 anti-LGBTQ right bills earlier this month. One would allow schools to segregate LGBTQ people, and the other would restrict access to transition-related health care for trans youth. This betrayal echoes a maneuver by Maryland Democrats in 2022 who killed their own trail over fears they wouldn't be able to override a veto by the Republican governor, who had not even expressed opposition to the bill. The bill was finally passed the following year. At the national level, Democrats have been scarcely better champions of LGBTQ rights. Biden pledged to pass the Equality Act in his first 100 days in office, which would ban discrimination against LGBTQ people across wide swaths of U.S. public life. 3 years later, it has yet to come to a vote in the Senate. Meanwhile, last year, Biden's own education department made anti-trans changes to Title IX, which mandates gender equality in sports programs. LGBTQ people denounced these changes as a roadmap for bigots to discriminate against them. The Democrats, which cast themselves as the champions for many minorities, including LGBTQ people, are continuing to prove that they will not even be fair weather friends to queer people as the far-right attacks get worse, and increasingly see us as a excuse me, and increasingly see us as political liability. This is in spite of opinion polls showing for years that anti-LGBTQ laws are deeply unpopular in U.S. society, with 64% of respondents to a March 2023 poll, including 55% of Republicans, saying there is too much legislation aimed at limiting the rights of transgender and gay people in America. Another poll last September found that 70% of respondents said politicians aren't qualified to write laws about trans people's medical care. And another showed that 65% of Americans oppose the Supreme Court's position that religious-based discrimination should be legal. Instead, the data shows that over the last year, roughly half of Americans are listing material concerns like unemployment, high living costs, inflation, and poverty over the poor national leadership as their most important concerns, while less than 0.5% said LGBTQ rights was their most important problem. Only a people's movement can confront far-right attacks. Only an independent political movement tied only to the working class, not the bought and paid for politicians of the capitalist ruling class, is capable of defending the rights of working and oppressed people. It has been our fight back that has forced them to implement any kind of reforms at all. And it has been working people leading the defense against the far-right's latest attacks as well. On Wednesday, January 24th, the PSL and other supporters of trans rights will hold a speak out at the Ohio State House in Columbus against Governor DeWine's attacks, and will raise the call for unity and resistance wherever such attacks arise. However, such reforms can only take us so far. If we want to really cement the complete equality of LGBTQ people and all other rights under attack, we must reconstruct the society of on a socialist basis, putting exploited and oppressed people in charge who will defend the needs of many, not the rich few. Let me read that last paragraph one more time. However, such reforms can only take us so far. If we want to really cement the complete equality of LGBTQ people and all other rights under attack, we must reconstruct this society on a socialist basis, putting exploited and oppressed people in charge who will defend the needs of the many, not the rich few. All right. Let me jump back here through these paragraphs. Give my quick summary opinion or personal thoughts. I am not a doctor. I am not a professional on LGBTQ rights, medical, mentally, physically. I do have concerns like other people, but my biggest concerns really are the oppression of people, the oppression of their free rights, of their freedom. When you have all these laws that actually oppress people, whether they're minorities, LGBTQ, women, what you're really doing is you're putting your approval on an authoritarian state. You're putting more laws, which conservatives actually want less government, right? Laws that oppress people, that restrict them from abortion rights, to restrict them from medical care for transitioning or for mental health. All you're really doing is just practicing a form of oppression and authoritarianism, as opposed to instead creating laws that are more like social programs that actually help people with education, with mental health, with clinical support. These laws are contradictory towards what conservatives say that they want. If they create these laws for moral values per se, right? As someone that grew up Christian Pentecostal all my life, I would say your laws aren't supposed to create oppression. They're supposed to protect people. So when you oppress people's rights, you're just contradicting the free will of the people to decide and to be judged by life, if that's what you believe in, in an afterlife where they're being judged. So you shouldn't really have any right to oppress people in that way. You should let them decide their own path, right? And then when it comes to uh, Democrats support, yeah, this is the classic carrot on a stick kind of thing that Democrats always do with all major policies that that affect minorities or minority groups, which is they say you have to vote for us because if not, we won't have the power to change things or to protect you. But they don't do it anyways. As the article states, uh, Biden had 3 years already, and he hasn't done anything really for LGBTQ rights. Uh, the same with immigration, uh, the same with the economy, the Build Back Better plan that he talks about that shows that the economy is great. It only shows that billionaires got richer while the poor got poorer, right? Money for wars, not to feed the poor, kind of thing, right? Um, so yeah, and in regards to the end of the article, yeah, this is right. Any kind of movement for rights that has ever risen up has risen up from the bottom of the ranks, from the working class, from the people, and specifically from socialist or communist that forced their governments with the pressure of strikes and boycotts to give us the 8-hour day, the 5-day work week, child labor laws, laws for women to be allowed to work. Um, and this is, I believe, another step where our government is probably going to throw crumbs at us and come up with some kind of weird laws where they give you just a little bit of right, a little bit of freedom, but not actual democratic freedom or true democracy, where we get to decide for ourselves what is best for our society. So, with that being said, that is my spiel on this article. And again, this one was posted on January 22nd, 2024. And again, these are my comments. I am not affiliated with Liberation News or PSL. I do follow them and I do appreciate their work. But feel free to comment if you ever have any questions or comments or concerns, and I'll be free to answer or add to it. Great. So let's go to the next one. Give me a second here. Drink a little bit. All right. Next article. I've taken notice that these articles, well, that last one was a lot longer than what I usually read. These articles are usually shorter, but it's good. It's good that they're bringing in more detail and substance on a few of them. Okay, let's move on. This next article is Workers Refuse to Give Up, Forming the Common Ground Cafe Cooperative. This one was written by Nick Koski on January 22nd, 2024. Wait a minute. Okay, yep, that's when it was written, and it was posted the 23rd, I guess. But yeah, it was written the 22nd. It's a 4-minute read. It's not that long. Common Grounds Bakery and Cafe. I'd go there. Let's check this out. All right. On July 2nd, we workers of Common Ground Bakery Cafe in Baltimore, Maryland, were suddenly all laid off and saw our place of work closed down after beginning a union drive under the banner of Common Ground Workers United. 2 months later, we successfully organized a takeover of the cafe as a worker-owned cooperative. The sudden closure of the cafe, which had been a staple of the Hampton neighborhood of Baltimore for over a quarter of a century, came as a shock to both us and our community members. We were given less than 12 hours notice via group message that we were simply not to report to work the next day, and without any explanation, 30 people suddenly lost their jobs. We came together to fight for a union because we were tired of struggling to make ends meet while we create wealth that makes other people rich. This is a sentiment shared by a huge and growing section of the working class. That's why support for unions is at a historic high. We wanted to come together to collectively stand up for our rights and win a better life. And we were determined that we wouldn't let the owner stop us no matter what, even if he closed down the shop. Unable to return to work, we began organizing our response to the closure the very next morning. The existing organization and channels of communication that were created during the union drive were crucial to our ability to act quickly. We created an Instagram account at Common Ground Workers and made a public statement calling out the owner of the cafe and stating our intention of forming a worker-owned cooperative to save our jobs and common ground. The account quickly gained a large following, and we saw enormous support from our surrounding community through donations and words of solidarity. We soon connected with the Baltimore Roundtable for Economic Democracy, BREAD, an organization that helps with cooperatives development in the city, and began forging a path towards collective ownership. Many other local cooperatives, such as Red Emma's, Mara Kitchen, Thread Coffee, and Meadow Wellness, jumped in to help us in building our new cooperative structure. After much effort and anticipation, we reopened the shuttered coffee shop as Commons Ground Cafe Cooperative on September 18th. After our grand opening, Common Ground Workers United partnered with the Baltimore Party for Socialism and Liberation, as well as several other local cooperatives, to host a film screening and panel discussion about worker ownership. Speakers shared their thoughts on the role of cooperatives in the labor movement and the fight for workplace democracy here and around the world. Our experience at Common Ground is not an isolated incident. It is a common tactic of the capitalists to close up shop when the workers organize together. Just a month after the closure of our cafe, another nearby Baltimore restaurant, Busboys and Poets, closed when workers were planning to strike. We were also partly inspired by a case of a unionized cafe in California, Slow Bloom, that closed down and was later revived by the workers as a cooperative. In times of capitalist crisis, it is also common for companies to fall apart and capitalists to move their wealth out of production, thereby threatening the livelihoods of workers. In those contexts, the workers sometimes take over the companies, as happened in Argentina in 2001. Worker owners make decisions collectively in our workers' council and committees. Individual worker owners may take on special roles or responsibilities, but they are overseen by committees dedicated to their particular area of work. All committees are overseen by the workers' council, consisting of all worker owners at the very top. It is essentially a reversal of the previous power structure. Furthermore, all worker owners are paid the same at the start and have an equal share in the business. Anyone who is newly hired is on track towards worker ownership after a year of getting settled into their position. This makes it so that there is never a permanent division between workers and owners within the workplace. However, there are still challenges to worker ownership. Although we operate under a cooperative model, this is done within a competitive economic system. Cooperatives are still under pressure to make profits, repay expenses, and remain competitive with other businesses. Furthermore, cooperatives face an added threat of eviction or supply cutoffs from the landlords and capitalists. Then there is the issue of what sectors of the working class can realistically form a cooperative. Bread has successfully helped many small food and service cooperatives grow through non-extractive loans and administrative support, but it would be a much more challenging task for larger scale industries and chain businesses where much of the working class are employed. These are some major limitations to cooperatives, which unions do not face, and this results in there being very few existing cooperatives. Despite these challenges, Baltimore has been and remains a leader in the cooperative movement. In 1794, the Baltimore Shoemakers Union formed the first cooperative in the United States when their union demands were not met. By the time of the first Reconstruction after the Civil War, Baltimore had become a hub of worker cooperatives and unions, especially among Black communities. These workers were organizing together to push many progressive reforms, including basic cooperative incorporation acts that are still fighting for to this day. At Common Ground Bakery Cafe, we were determined to form a union, and we didn't even let a shop closure stop us. Our fight as coffee shop workers of Baltimore have proven that when the workers are united, we will never be defeated. Hashtag economy. All right. Yeah, workers' cooperatives are very interesting to me. It's something that I always think about. Yeah, the experiment would be definitely small businesses like cafes, somewhere where the employee staff is probably smaller. I don't know what the limit could be, 20 to 100 people. And the organization is there, and there's actual form to create profit in regards to we do live in a capitalist system, and that's really a crutch for us, right? It's like we're trying to create profit for everybody to live sustainably, but at the same time we're competing with corporations that can undermine us by what they call being competitive, which is paying their workers less and charging less for their coffee. So the cooperative really is important. That is supported by their own community. First of all, so you can either go to a Starbucks that doesn't have a union. Most of them don't, and buy their coffee because it's a cool thing to do, or you can maybe pay a few pennies more, support a cooperative or a mom and pop cafe, and and when you support them, you're actually supporting your community more than you are buying, say, at Starbucks, where the profits are going to a corporation that's going to pay out their shareholders, right? Instead, you buy at a cafe, local family cafe, that is per se a cooperative one. Then, yeah, you're investing in the health of your own neighborhood in that way. So, if I personally try to find when I go shopping if there is available cooperatives, then that's where I go. I also look into entrepreneur businesses, like what would be a good entrepreneurship or how to create a cooperative out of a certain business that's already out there. I noticed there's a co-op in New York for rideshare uh, businesses, independent freelance drivers. I believe it's called the Co-op Ride, and it's supposed to replace Uber and Lyft. And it might be pennies more for the ride, but like I said, you're actually investing and you're giving back to your own community while getting things done. Um, so I think that it's a healthier ecosystem to go with, and that co-op actually has. I think it said it has over it has over like 3,000 drivers now in New York, and I think worldwide or nationwide they have about 6,000 drivers. I think they have another one in Colorado, like in Denver. Yeah, and that's a co-op that I support, and financially people can support as well if they're interested. You can go into their website and look into it and see if it's something that if you support, it might be a healthier, more sustainable economic system for the time being to support your fellow local workers, your neighborhood. Yep, and yeah, if that business keeps growing, then it'll branch out to other bigger cities, and eventually to smaller cities, and eventually to towns, right? But it's an interesting experiment. It's worth keeping an eye on. Yeah, and that's my thoughts on worker co-ops. I think they're a good step forward, as well as unions. Unfortunately, many unions became corrupt uh, for a while, but unions are the backbone of the working class. They were what They used to be run by socialists and communists, and now they're just run by capitalists. So yeah, you have to be a little weary about unions, but overall, unions do fight for your wages. So if you're in a job with a union, it is safer to say that you will be getting better paid and better benefits than if that job had no union. You know, so that's my opinion on that. We're going to move on to the next article. And the final article for today is this one. All right, let me take a sip here. Just a friendly reminder, as it says on the bottom of the screen here, no ads here, just a leftist read-along. Please share. Just a reminder as well, yeah, I'm doing this for my own personal growth, knowledge, as well as trying to help people out. Okay, let's move on to the article. 5 things to know about Louisiana's new far-right governor, Jeff Landry. Down in Louisiana. All right, this one was by Liberation Staff, Louisiana, published January 23rd, 2024. It's a short 4-minute read. Cool. The ultra-right-wing former Louisiana Attorney General Jeff Landry was sworn in January 7th as the state's governor. Jeff Landry represents the far-right reactionary wing of the ruling class. He is a vocal white supremacist, watchdog of the police state, an opponent of all working-class, marginalized, or oppressed communities. While some liberal and progressive forces see his election as a frightening departure from the past 8 years under John Bell Edwards, who held the title of the Deep South's only Democratic governor, there is scarce reason to believe that the lives of working-class Louisianans can ever be fundamentally transformed by the sham democracy of capitalism, regardless of which brand of ruling class elites happen to hold office at any given time. Red or blue, both parties' interests lie in the pocket of billion-dollar industry executives, not the needs of everyday working-class people. I need to read that again. Red or blue, both parties' interests lie in the pocket of billion-dollar industry executives, not the needs of everyday working people. While Bell Edwards did enact some reforms, including the expansion of Medicaid and ensuing stricter statewide standards for greenhouse gas emissions, we cannot be fooled into thinking that anything fundamentally changed for working-class Louisianans under Democratic leadership. Bell Edwards signed the abortion ban into law, refused to veto repressive anti-trans legislation, and was a staunch proponent of false solutions to climate change, including the introduction of dangerous, expensive new pipelines to already burdened communities. It is undeniable that voter suppression played a role in Landry's election. Only about 23% of registered voters cast ballots in November, the lowest turnout rates in recent state history. Turnout dropped significantly among Black and Democratic voters. Black voters faced severe voter suppression due to racist redistricting practices and the disenfranchisement of formerly incarcerated people. Landry has vowed to expand the police state. That's authoritarian. Landry is posturing as a tough-on-crime governor, famously a watchword for expanding the racist police state and increasing surveillance of poor Black communities. He promises to bring Louisiana State Police back to New Orleans under the guise of fighting crime, while offering no plans for addressing the root cause of crime, poverty and its ensuing racial inequities. Landry has called for a special legislative session solely focused on addressing crime in the state, which will likely result in expanded police powers. Historically, state troopers' presence in the city has been aggressive and violent towards Black residents. OSP also has a history of violating the city's consent decree, which is supposed to enforce police accountability. Moreover, OSP could bypass city council review for increased surveillance architecture. An example, drones and facial recognition technology. Bringing state troopers back into New Orleans will do anything but keep our community safe. Instead, it will bring heightened harassment, abuse, racial profiling and arrest, targeting poor and working class Black and brown residents. Number 2, Landry is a fierce opponent of LGBTQ and reproductive rights. Throughout his political career, Landry has been a fierce opponent of LGBTQ rights, women's rights, and reproductive justice. In 2012, as a U.S. representative, Landry opposed the establishment of a minor LGBTQ studies field at UL Lafayette. In 2016, as Attorney General, he announced he would block Governor Bell Edwards' attempt to require the state contracts protect LGBTQ employees from discrimination. In 2022, he creates an online tip line through which people could submit library content that was allegedly inappropriate, hypersexual for children, and anti-LGBTQ dog whistle to censor queer literature. Landry is rabidly anti-choice. In 2022, he supported a statewide abortion ban and suggested that anyone who disagrees with it should move out of the state. That same year, he twice urged the Louisiana State Bond Commission to delay funding for a power station that charges drainage pumps in New Orleans, a cruel punishment for the city's decriminalization of abortion. Number 3, Landry answers to the fossil fuel industry, not the people of Louisiana. All right. Short translation to that, Landry is a puppet of the oligarchy. All right, let's read along. Despite representing one of the states most ravaged by climate change, Jeff Landry is a vocal climate denier and one of the fossil fuel industry's closest friends. At an energy conference in 2017, he described climate change as a hoax, aligning himself with the world's biggest polluters. He is a staunch defender of the oil and gas industry. After his election, the Oil and Gas Association praised him as a friend of the industry. As Attorney General, he blocked a federal attempt to mitigate air pollution in Cancer Alley, an 85-mile stretch of land between New Orleans and Baton Rouge that is home to over 200 petrochemical plants, where the cancer rate for residents is up to 50 times higher than the national average. The Landry administration is likely to derail the state's carbon-reducing goals, curtail efforts to expand renewable energy, and greenlight destructive drilling projects. Meanwhile, the state faces some of the country's worst climate outcomes, including increasingly strong hurricane seasons, drought, record-high summer temperatures, coastal wetland erosion, air pollution, and dismal health outcomes caused by petrochemical polluters. Air pollution and dismal health outcomes caused by petrochemical polluters. Number 4, Landry has repeatedly ignored or flaunted democratic processes. During his run for governor, Landry refused to attend debates alongside his fellow gubernatorial candidates, believing himself to be above the rules of law. During his term as Attorney General, he pressured his political opponents, from university administrators to journalists, with legal action if they contested his stance. In 2020, he joined other Republican attorney generals to falsely assert that the 2020 presidential election suffered from voter fraud, part of a widespread effort for far-right Republicans to stay in the White House. Due to ongoing voter suppression efforts in Louisiana, example, gerrymandering and voter registration laws, Landry won the 2023 governor's primary outright and faced no opponent in a runoff race. Landry is a vocal white supremacist. That's number 5. I'll read it again. Landry is a vocal white supremacist. Landry has a loathsome racial justice record. He has repeatedly invoked racist, anti-Black rhetoric and has voted for numerous laws intended to curtail civil rights and expand police repression. He once called Black Lives Matter protests armed thugs and referred to a policy intended to reduce racial discrimination in policing as a hug a thug policy. Under Landry, the Louisiana Department of Justice awarded a legal fellowship in honor of E.D. White, the Louisiana Supreme Court Justice who ruled in favor of legal, separate but equal segregation in the landmark case Plessy versus Ferguson. In 2023, he tried to force immigrants' rights associations to turn over confidential information about immigrant communities. That's him. Jeff Landry, photo by Gage Skidmore. Yeah, he sounds like a tool. All right, let's go here. Landry has vowed to expand the police state. Yeah, that's bad unless you're an authoritarian. Why would you spend billions on arming police officers that are historically racist with tanks and military weapons when you can just produce jobs and education to uplift the community, which would probably cost you a fraction of the cost? You know, you can spend billions on police force armies, or you can spend millions on school infrastructure, job infrastructure, giving people good jobs, things that actually are preventive to crime, things that are actually preventive to crime instead of reactionary, like calling cops that have a record of abuse at home and at work. Okay. Landry is a fierce opponent of LGBTQ and reproductive rights. So we already talked about this today. Yeah, why oppress a minority if you're not a bigot, right? What is it your business what these people do for their personal health? You're saying, I don't. What's their excuse? It's against the Bible. Well, you shouldn't be judge and executioner. That's against the Bible too, right? It costs money. No, it doesn't cost as much money as letting people go crazy and then putting them in hospitals. And it's a good deed to actually fund these health programs for LGBTQ people so that they can be stable, so that they can get stable jobs, so they can be stable in their communities, and live happy lives as everybody deserves to. All right, next, Landry answers to the fossil fuel industry, not the people of Louisiana. So when I read this, to me, it always goes back to the duopoly. These politicians, they're puppets. They're puppets to the oligarchy. Why? Because the oligarchy, the elitists, the banks, the enterprises, they pay for the laws, right? They fund these politicians to run. They fund them massively, and they control the propaganda. They control the message in the media, so that the laws are curtailed or made to benefit the corporations and not the working class. It's proven statistics that no matter who you elect, generally, I think, like I said, it was 99% of the time, the working class appeals for law changes are never supported. But as soon as a corporation needs a law changed, they're moving like rabbits all over the place, right? So, I mean, it's clear that we don't live in a democracy. We live in a simulation of a democracy, which means they just put up a good show, put up a good show to make you feel like you're voting, and like that really matters. When in reality, what matters is working class solidarity, which is what has within even this capitalist system, we had communist and socialist organizations in the earlier decades of the 20th century. They were the ones that would get boots on the ground to actually create movements, boycotts, strikes that won actual rights and benefits for the working class. Nowadays, we need to bring that back. All right, number 4, Landry has repeatedly ignored or flaunted democratic processes. So I'm not too familiar again with what they said here that he's done. What I do understand is the bottom line, the gerrymandering and the voter suppression laws. That in itself shows you that there really isn't a democracy, just a simulation. And then the Democrats pull out the carrot and the stick and saying, well, you have to vote for us, otherwise there'll be more gerrymandering and more voter registration laws, which they do too, you know. And at the end of the day, when they are elected, they don't solidify their own laws to actually protect the people. All right, a vocal white supremacist. Yeah, maybe that's what sells in his district. I don't know. But let's go to this line here where he says he once called Black Lives Matter protesters armed thugs. Yeah, why? Why would you call them black thugs? Because the mainstream media decided to show that maybe one or two or just a few places that got burnt down through the major protests. Uh, we're lucky it wasn't worse, actually. We're lucky that they didn't burn down the whole country. And justifiably, I guess. I mean, think about all the things that we've done to Black people for generations, or minorities for generations. Uh, exploited them, enslaved them, practically genocide Native Americans, uh, rewritten their history, fully decimated their culture, their way of life. Yeah, and the reparations that they are owed are nowhere to be seen. You know, so no, they're not thugs, and no, it's not a hug a thug policy. It's what they're owed. It's what it's systemically necessary to uplift people that have been oppressed or suppressed for centuries. Um, so this goes again back towards what my other earlier mention of how they rather use the rod instead of using preventive measures to actually uplift the communities. They want to spend billions on using reactionary violent systems like a police state, authoritarian tactics, which contradict their own so-called belief of individuality and freedom. So that's I guess this clown dude in a nutshell. Where he will go, how much progress he will make, probably not much. He'll probably get voted out and cycled out in another few years. Um, and the Democrats won't do much to alleviate the issues either. So then another clown will come in another decade or so and replace the Democratic clowns. Right? So that's the circus. All right, let's see here. Those are the three articles for today. Let me check if there's anything else. Sometimes they put one up late, like right around now or by midnight. No, looks good. All right. Thank you all for tuning in tonight. If you haven't tuned in, well, you can always watch the live stream later, listening to my bad reading while you're working or while you're, I don't know, doing dishes, whatever. All right. So see you guys next week. Hopefully everybody has a good Sunday evening. And don't forget, hashtag Genocide Joe, hashtag Free Palestine. I'll write it out for you guys. And I'm sure there will be more updates on those articles in regards to what's going on in Gaza recently. It's been covered most of the month. If you can, please support. The latest is that let's see here. The UNRWA has been defunded, and they provide aid for Gaza and refugees. Israel has claimed that they have been involved in the October 7th attack, which has prompted Western nations to cut their funding. So, yeah, it's a genocide, whichever way you see it, right? Bombing women and children sounds like genocide, right? Defunding them while they're getting bombed, while they're being oppressed, yeah, it sounds like genocide. So please fund the UNRWA if you can. Here, I'll put it in the comments. Cool. Look into that hashtag. Do what you can. Support people in need. Be kind, be humble, and have a great rest of your weekend.